name's Michael Reed and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for ThousandEyes, and I'm joined today with Ted Sanfilippo from Sutherland. And it's a pleasure to have you in the studio with us today. So Ted, thank you for your partnership with ThousandEyes, and your official title is AVP Global Network Services, and you're also the AVP for Technology Operations Centre, which is the GTOC, the Global Technology Operations Centre at Sutherland. So why don't we start with a brief introduction of what those two roles actually mean?
Sure. So the Global Network Services operation is responsible for the network connectivity for our brick and mortar sites to our data centers, as well as from our data centers to our client environments. We also are responsible for the connectivity for our work at home users into our data centers to be able to access the applications that they need to perform their job. They also sit down with our clients to design and configure the overall architecture to meet their business needs. Our GTOC operation, they're responsible for the monitoring of our network assets. They're also responsible for monitoring our servers, our applications, our data centers, et cetera. And that monitoring, what they do is they look for alerts that have certain thresholds on it, and they act upon those alerts. Then when they act upon that, it could be that they're opening a ticket, they could be triaging it, or they could be escalating the issue to somebody else, or they may be parking that, and that's their overall responsibility.
Awesome. And Sutherland's a pretty unique organisation, and for the folks at home, maybe you can explain a little bit around what Sutherland does and the unique environments that you're supporting, I think, in terms of your customers, the number of customers, and how they can, or how your users connect into those customers.
Sure. Sutherland is a business process transformation company. We take on hundreds of clients. We have hundreds of clients working with us today, and we take on some of their services. It could be their back office services like customer support or troubleshooting, technical support, or what have you. We also do a host of other different things as well. We support roughly around 44,000 employees around the world. Of those 44,000 employees, in today's environment, about 33,000 of them are work-at-home employees.
And so you've been through just the most tremendous transformation. I think, look, the whole world's been through this migration to work from home, but I think in your environment it's more complex, and I think it's more complex because of the way in which you service your customers. So maybe talk us through what it looked like pre-pandemic, which I know is very much a bricks and mortar traditional business, to what you did to pivot really rapidly to where you are today.
Sure. So, pre-COVID, basically of the 33,000 users, pretty much all of them were in a brick and mortar environment. So, in order to support them from my standpoint, if there was an issue, we would have an IT resource on site that could go and look over the person's shoulder and determine, is it an individual user having this problem, or it's a multitude of people having the problem immediately, and they can determine what's the escalation process for that, or if they could resolve the problem there.
And you had complete control in that environment. You could control the infrastructure you're providing, how they're connected into it. You had
Correct.
Total visibility into that space.
So those individuals would be a part of an MPLS network where you have QoS, you have SLAs for circuit. So the performance is always going to be pretty steady, barring any major fiber cuts or whatever. But we have redundancy built into that to afford that failover. But moving to work at home, you don't have that luxury of an MPLS circuit at everyone's home and the proper QoS metrics for that. So we needed to have better visibility and be able to determine, hey, if this person is on a shoddy ISP, we can say either get off of it, or we have to bring you back into the brick and mortar site and work from there.
And that's, I think, the challenge for your business was, okay, a lot of these folks that work for you are actually doing voice calls potentially, or video calls, or chat. So it's real-time communication, so to speak. And so you've gone from this controlled environment, you've sent them all home in effect. You've done that arguably incredibly quickly. And I would say, if you look at that, that became a massive differentiator for your business. And I think that's probably what's exciting about the fact that you actually expanded your market share in your area during that time. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. Yeah. So being able to move quickly, during that crisis, within weeks we were able to move people to work at home and securely get them to connect to our environment and provide the same services they were before. The one thing that we had to evolve was the monitoring of that environment. We had a challenge initially where you'd have multiple agents or employees calling in saying they have a problem, but you couldn't really get an understanding of where that problem was because it would be a different statement as to, I'm losing connectivity to this solution, I can't log into this solution, what have you. And getting something like ThousandEyes deployed to that, it afforded us the ability to actually look at actual data on all the users for that particular application or client environment and assess the situation and come up with a quick solution to it. Or at least, even if we couldn't get a solution, we knew the problem. If the problem wasn't Sutherland or wasn't the ISP, whatever it was, having that gave great confidence to our customer base, being able to show them that.
And they're all in effect servicing your customers, so to speak, or representing your customers in effect, as from either home now or what was traditionally a bricks and mortar organization.
That's correct. Yeah. So with COVID and prior to COVID, the agents would be sitting in our brick and mortar locations where we were able to provide really tight SLAs. We had QoS over our MPLS environment, so performance was pretty darn good, right? And when we moved to work at home, we're adding so many different layers of ISPs that don't have SLAs and don't have the best services compared to what we were given before. So we had to be able to monitor and make changes to get to the same level of performance and expectations our clients had always had in the brick and mortar world. And by moving them to a work at home environment and using ThousandEyes, it allowed us to determine this is a good ISP carrier. This is where this person is working at home is meeting to our SLA standards. And if it wasn't, then we made adjustments to move that person either to a brick and mortar or move them away from Sutherland.
And that's where I think even more, I look at your environment, it's even more complex than most because not only are you providing connectivity into your head office, so to speak, your mothership, your infrastructure, but you've got hundreds of clients that each of your agents, your users, your internal employees are not only requiring to connect to you, but they're also connecting into those customers or those companies as well. So that is like the ultimate Rubiks Cube of challenge from an IT standpoint. So talk us through that. I mean, you've got someone that's sitting at home, they're now on a new internet connection that you have no control over. They're accessing your environment. In some cases, it's your PC infrastructure. Some cases, it's theirs. They're also accessing applications that sit in your customer's environment. And they ring in, they call, and they say they've got a challenge with something. How has that changed the way in which your team looks into that environment? And how could that have been, or how was it when you first went from home to how it is today, now that you've implemented ThousandEyes?
When we went to work at home, the things we were lacking was having the IT resource there that could give an overall view. So we needed visibility into the person's work at home environment, the PC, their internet service provider, and in the performance to those different applications. And when ThousandEyes covered all that, we were able to see the CPU, see the memory, see if there's a performance degradation on the actual physical box that they're using, or if they're using Wi-Fi or their internet, their Ethernet connection to the internet, if there's a performance degradation there, all the way to the application. So it touched upon all those different elements that we couldn't normally do, from a work at home standpoint, that we were doing in a brick and mortar environment.
And I think that's the challenge. You're dealing with folks at home that don't understand IT, firstly,
right.
And so they're calling in with a challenge. I think one of those examples you gave me the other night was the Wi-Fi example. I mean, the goal is to try to get everyone to hard connect because you get a better connection, but obviously you haven't got control of their environment. Some folks are just going to switch on Wi-Fi. But there was a good example that you gave around one of those folks that had multiple Wi-Fi connections.
Yeah. So we had an employee who they through the history we saw at one point they were connecting to their personal Wi-Fi, and then later on the performance got really bad, and what happened, they connected to another Wi-Fi within that apartment complex. And so we were able to say, well, this is why you're having the problem. You're not connected to the right Wi-Fi, and then secondly, you need to connect to an Ethernet connection versus using Wi-Fi because it just adds more potential performance issues.
And so that leads me to the next thought, which is you've now got users, and they're really located all over the world. And now with the home component, they really truly are located anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And you've got a position where you can continue to invest in folks. It doesn't really matter where they are. But something you shared before last night, actually, was the planning element to it, as in you've got an ability to see what service providers in which locations are the best to provide the support. So talk me through how that's changed the way in which you think about hiring folks, shall we say.
Sure. So there's a couple things. So one, whenever we look to hire somebody, we go through the interview process. Our HR department actually has them go to a website and do a performance test to see that they meet our requirements for a work at home environment. You know, whatever the latency needs to be, whatever the bandwidth download and upload speeds are to be, right? And you know, so that's basically what I would call a birth certificate. It's a stamp saying this is what you were when we hired you. What ThousandEyes affords us is now here's the history of that person. So if they tested somewhere where it was better performance and they went home and their performance is bad, we'll see that over time.
They go to a coffee shop or something,
yeah,
and do the interview, and then they turn up at home and it's a little different.
Exactly. So we're able to assess their performance and say, listen, you know, your internet is bad. You either need to go to another provider, or you're coming to the brick and mortar site, or we sever contacts, right? So the other thing too is when we're looking at a geo or an area to open up new business or existing business, we can see from a history like these 4 carriers in this region, 2 out of the 4 of them are good, 2 are bad, and we will only do business with those 2, or we just have that region be brick and mortar depending on where that is.
Totally. Because you made that transition so fast, you were able to grow that market share in your space. Do you believe that that's something to do with, would you say IT really afforded that ability for the company to pivot fast? What would your take be on actually that scenario?
Well, yeah, definitely it was IT. I mean, I think it was everybody at Sutherland was able to do the right thing and move people quickly. It was a team effort, right?
Massive team.
But having a lot of the things in place ahead of time, I think, or at least the ability to apply those things was the big thing. Was the big winner in that scenario of getting services up and running from a work at home situation. Yeah.
And then an ability to see inside it. Now, one thing I think about, particularly given that you've got those hundreds of customers that you're also seeing inside their network, and I know when you've had challenges come forward trying to find the answer to the Rubiks Cube, the equation there is it your network, is it their network, is it their PC, is it their home, is it their service provider, is it your VPN tunnel, is it your data center, is it their application?
Yeah.
How has it helped you sort of give guidance and feedback to the customers that you're servicing as well, not just your own internal IT, but your clients?
So I'll give you an example. I think this will help nail the point. But so we'll have scenarios where we're troubleshooting a particular issue, and at the end of the day, it's always the network is the problem. Everybody says that. You know, the server team blames me and my team and all that. And a lot of times, so we'll go through our troubleshooting, we'll have our reports, and then sometimes we'll say, well, listen, we're not seeing anything. You know, client A, can you please look in your environment and take a look at it? And the responses will vary, but they'll typically point back to us. And there's a lot of time lost during that analysis. It could go weeks, right, depending on how sporadic the problem is. And so in that same scenario, we had an incident where we showed the ThousandEyes report saying the packet loss is right here at the data center that you're in. It wasn't them, but but they own the relationship with that carrier or that data center, and then they can go back to them and say, hey, whoever the data center was, you got to fix this, or we fail over to the other path.
Yes.
And so that took what would normally take 2 weeks, and also the pushback we were getting because they didn't see the issue to be resolved in a day or 2.
Yeah, and that's the magic. That's one of the big powers of ThousandEyes. So I'm sure, look, throughout your experience there's been some probably major outages that you've had to manage through and deal with. Talk us through how that sort of presents itself and the reaction from your team and how you manage through it to an end state that's resolved that solution.
Sure. So there was an outage around the fall of 2021, I believe it was, and there was a major service provider interruption on the west coast of the U.S., and that impacted a lot of our different lines of business that would come into that, would cross over those particular paths on the internet. And one of the things that helped us was, ThousandEyes pointed out that it was carrier X that was causing this particular problem. And so we were able to go to the clients and say, listen, there's an outage by this carrier. There's nothing we can do about it, but at least you know what it is. It's not something that's, that's hidden, and you're comfortable with we were at, and we worked through it, and we made some path changes and stuff like that. But it gave us that visibility to be able to go back to the client and say, we know what it is, here it is, and this is
And
how
here's
we
the
plan.
data to prove that this is where it is, which is the challenge in the past. This is the blame the network scenario. Everyone's blaming each other, so you can turn up with that. So talk me through how your team looks at this now. So what are they looking at? Dashboards? Are they looking at a monitoring space? Do they break it down by region? How do they see the world at the moment through ThousandEyes?
So we utilize it in different scenarios. So the way we broke out the dashboards, we set up dashboards per client, per customer, and per region, depending, right? And then we also set up dashboards so that certain organizations could look at it. Not only could the GTOC have visibility to it, and not only does the IT local ops have visibility to it, but we also allowed some of the BRMs to be able to view it, and some of the service delivery teams that own the relationship with the client to be able to have that visibility and reduce the amount of volumes of escalations to the GTOC and to the network engineering organizations as well as the IT help desk. So having that display has been very helpful. And for each client, it's a different setup dashboard because there's different tests that we put in place. We have a standard template that we use for the different regions on 3 to 4 different basic tests that we always do, and then based on the client and their applications and where they reside, we choose the ones that make sense for that particular line of business and test those different parameters. And
is it something that you look to provide back to your customers as well to show either an SLA or the amount of service and uptime, I suppose you could say? Have you expanded into that space?
Yeah. So basically, of the 100+ clients that we have, they're basically like a snowflake. They're completely unique. The different scenarios. We'll have clients that have applications that sit in a cloud or sit in their data center or resides in our data center or what have you. And there's different ways we connect. We'll connect with them either directly through an MPLS connection. We'll connect to them from a point-to-point, an IPsec tunnel, or through the internet. So because of all these unique solutions, the architecture of it is rather complex, and the monitoring of it becomes also complex. And the fact that with ThousandEyes we're able to monitor all of the different, the applications in these different scenarios, it gives us that visibility of how everything is performing, and we got a good pulse on that, and then be able to help us troubleshoot any issues that arise, be proactive, need be, if there's any performance issues or degradation of services.
And moving forward, what do you think? Does the business continue a hybrid model? If you were allowed everyone back to bricks and mortar today, is that what the company would pivot back towards, or is it really a hybrid?
It's a hybrid model, yeah. I think and heavier on the work at home versus the brick and mortar. It just seems to be the best way to get talent because you focus on a particular city or region, you're limiting your potential candidates and the strengths. If you are able to expand that, you're going to have a higher opportunity to get good employees.
Yes, right? And the real key, and that's what I think you've worked out really quickly, is you've got to provide that ability for them to work from home, to work from anywhere, but it comes with all these challenges, and IT is the one that's hit with it, but that visibility component becomes the real trick in actually enabling that work from home capability. So Sutherland's been through just the most incredible transformation over the past few years in terms of how you're addressing the pandemic, how you've pivoted your entire company, how this work from home environment's transitioned the way in which you service your customers, how you compete and market, how you've gained market share, etc. What would be the sort of 3 key pieces of advice that you give to your peers listening here on how to address their challenges today as an example of what you've seen in the past 2 years?
Sure. Well, first one is visibility. Getting the visibility into the user's experience is key, right? So we can understand what their problem is. And the next thing would be having that evidence and showing, this is where the problem resides. And so it allows us the ability to tackle that situation and resolve it quickly. And then the third thing is being agile enough to meet our business needs as we grow and as we take on new challenges in this environment.
Ted or Flip, now that we know each other well, thank you for coming in and sharing your experiences. Sutherland is really the most phenomenal example of ThousandEyes really pushing it to its extremes. We love that you've shared that with the audience here today and your advice on how they can also transition their organisation moving forward. We really appreciate your partnership and we look forward to going bigger and better in the future. So appreciate you joining us here.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.